Welcome to the We Are Human Leaders podcast. I'm Alexa Zana, co-director at Human Leaders, and today, Sally Clark and I are talking to global leader in servant leadership and communication, Louise Evans. Louise Evans is the founder and the director of the 5 Chairs Project. She's a behavioural coach, corporate trainer and facilitator, speaker, and author of 5 Chairs, 5 Choices. Her TED Talk has garnered over 4.5 million views globally, and for a very good reason. Her powerful framework for non-violent communication, the 5 Chairs, up-levels our self-awareness to transform how we communicate in our workplaces, our schools, and in our own homes around the world. With over 20 years of experience working with companies like Gucci, Fiat, UniCredit Bank, Barilla, British Gas, Tod's, Duracell, Diesel, Manpower, and the European Council, just to name a few, Louise is not only a powerful proponent of insight and change, she's also an inspiring and delightfully warm individual. She's a real beacon of human-centered leadership. This conversation is peppered with practical tips and relatable stories, and we hope that you love it as much as we did. Welcome, and let's dive in.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you start by sharing with us a little of your own story and how you came to design the 5 Chairs framework?
Interestingly enough, I realized that the framework comes from my relationship, which was rather complicated with my mother. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really that conscious about this and that until very recently, when I thought about, somebody else asked me the question, how come the 5 Chairs? And I looked back at this rather dysfunctional relationship with my mother and thought, well, I actually designed it for myself in order to improve the relationship with her, because she's an extraordinary, powerful, small 97-year-old Welsh woman who she's small, but she's like a volcano. We had this love-hate relationship, and very often if I misbehaved, as one does as children, then she would sort of abandon me and just leave me on my own, which was pretty devastating. So I grew up becoming somewhat possessive and jealous because I was always afraid of losing dear people, losing their attention, and therefore feeling lonely and abandoned and all the rest of it. So, so I had, I was becoming quite dysfunctional myself, because being possessive and jealous in life is really hard work, because you're living in the pockets of other people, especially people that you sort of love, trying to keep them, controlling them all the time. So I was a bit of a late developer. Around about the age of 30, I thought, I can't carry on like this. I have to do something about my behavior, because before, obviously, it was my mother's fault. It had nothing to do with me. But then the realization was, no, I don't think so. And asking that question, or saying to myself, is there something wrong with you, was, of course, it's always devastating. And when the answer came back, well, maybe there is, that was the beginning of a long journey of 30 years of working on myself, basically. And out of that came the chairs.
Amazing. And what were you noticing in your behavior at that time? What sort of signals had you seen that were starting to give rise to some awareness that it might be something that you could change in yourself, that there was a choice or different choices you could make to change your behavior and your experience of relationships?
Yeah, I realized that I wasn't in the flow of my own life. If you're suffering from jealousy or possessiveness, you spend a good part of your life controlling other people and following other people. Yeah, and checking to see if they are doing anything which might be of damage to yourself. So I think those were the two behaviors which made me realize that I was starting my own life. But I had to ask for help, and I went to a counselor who helped me a lot, and then started on a long spiritual path, basically with meditation and yoga and practically all the practices under the sun, just to get to know myself better and find alternatives. So I had to do a lot of talking to myself, and I suppose that's where the 5 Chair they come in there, because it's like you put a mirror up to yourself and you look at yourself and you ask yourself, are these behaviors serving me or not? And when the answer is no, they're not, then it's okay, what's the alternative?
You know, I'm hearing a few things from you there, Louise. The first one that I really, was drawn to, because I guess it somewhat correlates to my own personal story as well. And that is this idea that so many of us have some of these patterns that we know are patterns, but we're not always able to really identify where they come from. And when we, are really able to trace them back into some of those historic situations from childhood, perhaps, or early adolescence, we realize that we're responding to stimulus in the environment and other people now in the same way that we were conditioned to do so as a child, for most of us unknowingly. And my path very much, I guess, correlates with yours in that sense as well. And probably from a different set of circumstances, but this idea for me that as a young adult and as a young leader in particular, the need to control the situations around me as a way to feel in control was such a just a regular behavior of mine, and one that you are pretty much frantically feeling like you're always behind in, because we know that we cannot control other people, other environments and things like that, but it's something that you can just feel like you're continually chasing, and then there's always this sort of lack of, because you're never able to actually get on top of all of that, can you?
Oh, that's right. No sense of abundance in life at all, quite the
Mm-hmm.
opposite. But I think the devastating thing is that if you are driven, in my case, by this sense of scarcity and also this sense of living jealousy and possessiveness, and the control around that, you push people away, which is
Absolutely.
exactly the opposite to what you're trying to do, is to be safe in a relationship. So I wasn't holding down relationships with men, for example. I couldn't sort of have a relationship that lasted for more than 2 years, sometimes less, and then I would leave them, and it was all their
Mm,
fault if it didn't
mm.
work, obviously. All of those dynamics of low self-awareness.
And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because the jealousy and the possessiveness, we can do it quite subconsciously. And for the other person, that can very much be an experience of feeling like they're not trusted or respected. And that's obviously a fairly fundamental component of our healthy relationships. So it's unknowingly we're creating that dynamic, not seeing it, and then things blow up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to say that the 5 chairs, when I did actually get it, start developing it, I was using it on myself all the time, and still use it on myself. It saved my marriage, basically.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I saved my marriage. I mean, I've been with my husband. He's from Palestine. I've been with him now for almost 30 years, but we only got married 3 years ago. But in the meantime, I left him as well, and he was very patient with me, because he saw that I was working on myself and I was really beginning to get beyond my dysfunctional behaviors. And then, as the 5 chairs grew as a method, and I was training it more and more, then it became part of the way I live, and it's transformed my behavior completely, and I feel so incredibly happy at the moment, and more stable, and more able to have a deep, loving relationship than ever before.
Obviously, Louise, the bulk of your work is really using this in things like organizational contexts. I know that you've used this in school. So we've heard how your individual experience and your upbringing and your early relationships have really formulated the 5 chairs. Can you actually walk us through what exactly the 5 chairs are, and how we might recognize when we're operating from each of these 5 chairs?
For those who are listening, I need people to sort of visualize 5 chairs lined up. I mean, they don't necessarily have to be lined up; they could be in a circle. But there are 5 chairs with 5 colors. So we have red, yellow, green, blue, and violet, indigo. In fact, the colors come from the chakras in the body. So you start, the red is in the genital area, the yellow moves up to the solar plexus, the green is the heart, the blue is the throat chakra, which is beautiful for expression. And then you move into the violet, which is the third eye or the crown. And I think that each chair has a color. It has an animal metaphor. It has a famous quote which goes with it. It also has an object, and it has a set of attitudes and behaviors. So the idea is that as you move through your day, you can begin to use the 5 chairs as a mirror to your own behaviors. So as maybe the temperature is rising in a conversation, they allow you to become more aware of what's going on. For example, because if let's say I'm in a conversation with somebody and somebody just banally says, well, that's a stupid idea. Now, in that moment, I can react in different ways. And if I was in the red chair, my reaction in my head would be, excuse, who the hell do they think they are? Excuse me, what do you mean that's a stupid idea? And I would start and rant and rave, and I would lose control, and I would get into an amygdala hijack. And and when you're in, that is the jackal chair, because the name of the animal is the jackal, and the name of the chair is attack, where we get into sort of unconscious irrational behavior with all the poor leadership behaviors that you can have, like finger pointing and excessive micromanagement, focusing on people's weaknesses rather than their strengths, etc., etc. So that's the reaction to, well, that's a stupid idea, from the yellow chair is the hedgehog chair, is more, yeah, I suppose it is a stupid idea. And I'm not surprised, because I usually have stupid ideas, so I just don't know why I don't keep my mouth shut. I think it would be much better, just disappear, basically. So there we're talking about self-doubt. We're talking about all the limiting behaviors that happen to us, self-sabotage. I mean, the imposter syndrome, and when we're in unhealthy comparison, always comparing ourselves with other people, or we're people pleasing. And if you're a leader, you're not believing in yourself, you feel inferior, you're afraid to speak up, you do minimal delegation, you're overprotective, victim. These are some of the sort of characters in. And those 2 chairs, the red one, the jackal and the hedgehog, are the ones that hold us back in life, that hold organizations back, that hold families back, but in particular hold ourselves back first. So what we're trying to do is move out of those into the green chair, which I think is probably my favorite one. Because in the green chair, if somebody says, well, that's a stupid idea. In the green chair, I take a pause, a deep breath, and I think, okay, interesting. I go into full curiosity. I don't go into stimulus response. I try to take a deep breath and sort of create space between the stimulus and my response, where I can explore, where I can be inquisitive, basically. I will be curious about somebody. I will ask questions. I will open up the situation, try to be creative, because it's the chair, it's the meerkat chair. And if you've ever seen a meerkat, they sort of stand on sentinel duty, for 1 hour, just looking around on the savannah, watching out for the predators, which is like our predator thinking in a way, And it's the same in the meerkat chair. It's the sort of preparation to be emotionally stable and rational, so that you can go into other behaviors which are more indicative of virtuous, productive leadership. So I love that chair, and it takes a lot of practice, actually. I mean, there's a lot of mindfulness practicing there, a lot of really important holding oneself, and again, creating this space. It can just be a few seconds where you manage yourself and your emotions in order to come into the world in a more rational and productive way. Then we leads into the big chairs, which are the blue chair and the violet chairs. So the blue chair is the dolphin. Just love the dolphin. The dolphin is actually self-aware. I mean, if you put a mirror in the tank, the dolphins go and they look at themselves, they play with themselves. And so the dolphin really represents ourselves when we're in self-awareness. So if somebody said to me, well, that's a stupid idea, then I might be thinking something like, okay, so they've said that's a stupid idea. And when I hear that, I'm feeling actually quite upset, because what is important for me is to be able to have a conversation, an open conversation, an explorative conversation. And so I'm going to dog for my needs to speak here, and I will ask the person if they will listen to me to the end of what I'm trying to say, and we'll have a conversation and challenge this together. So in the dolphin chair, which is the detect chair, like being a detective of your own self, you're really working on who are you, what do you need. It's feelings and needs. And actually a lot of the dolphin chair is based on nonviolent communication, where I'm exploring my feelings and my needs and how to speak into the world, and I'm making requests and I'm explaining myself to other people, not letting other people guess who I am, because people usually guess wrong. We can't read each other's minds yet. So there I'm as a leader, I'm the driver, I'm the mentor, I'm the motivator, the delegator, the communicator, the risk taker as well. But I'm sort of becoming, in many ways, the role model for leadership. So beautiful chair, the assertive chair in many, many ways. And the last one is a gorgeous chair again, really difficult, so incredibly important in the world right now, and certainly what's going on in Europe. Is the giraffe. So the reaction in the last chair is to somebody who says, well, that's a stupid idea, would be more like, okay. So they think that's a stupid idea. I wonder what the thinking is behind that comment there. I mean, they look pretty defensive. There must be something going on in their life right now, which I don't know about, but is creating a very, very strong resistance to my idea. And I want to find out about that. It might be something to do with change. They don't like change. They get resistant to change. So I need to find out. So here we are trying to understand the person in front of us. So we're going into full empathy. We're trying to be patient and tolerant, and be curious about the person. So we're the listener, we're the coach, we're the carer, we're the trust builder, the includer. Yeah. And that's why it's such an important chair, I think, for us right now, in general, in the world, is this kind leadership, this servant leadership, which is we really need to develop more and more, because we're going through a lot, and we've got a lot of stuff, is a lot of difficulty is going to come up in the world right now in the coming months. So the giraffe is important. And so the idea is that we're trying to turn the volume down on the first two chairs, the jackal and the hedgehog, and really turn the volume up on the meerkat, the dolphin, and the giraffe. Because once you get meerkat balance, you can decide in the moment, situationally, whether you need to be more assertive as a dolphin or more empathetic as a giraffe. And that will sort of lead you into a balanced approach to leadership. That's the general idea.
What I really love is there's this sense of, when we're in the jackal or the hedgehog, we're really trying to sort of regulate externally, trying to control the situation, or just really responsive to those extrinsic environmental factors. Whereas when we step into our power, there's much more of a self-regulation going on, and that's where we can really empower ourselves with choices and bring the curiosity, the detective qualities, or the empathy as appropriate to the situation, and really create really healthy communication with the people around
Yeah,
us.
that is it. I think the main message of the chair is we always have a choice. And that is our responsibility. And if we should slip into the jackal chair and start judging and criticizing, etc., then we take full responsibility for the fact that we have produced that behavior and manage it. I mean, we can just say, look, I'm sorry, I'm sorry I snapped at you, I'm having a bad day. But in the five chairs, the language, you made me angry, doesn't exist. The belief is nobody can ever make you do anything. I mean, they can point a gun to your head, but even there, you can decide whether to resist or whether to. There are many things you can do as somebody points a gun to your head. I mean, you can faint or fake faint, or you can be you can do many things. You say, please, not me, him. I mean, we think we don't have power, but we do have power of choice in every moment. It's just recognizing that.
What I love, Louise, about that is, there's this famous Viktor Frankl quote, which, you've really alluded to here. And this is the idea that that space between stimulus and response is really where our power lies. And we often see this, and as you've mentioned, rooted in childhood scenarios where we say, this person treated me this way, therefore I feel this way, or I'm acting this way, and it's this person's problem, or this or that. But that meerkat, that weight chair, really plays into that, that Viktor Frankl's quote, because that is really where our power lies, is when that stimulus happens, before we react, before we attack, before we go into self-doubt. That's where the moment is.
Such a fabulous book. He said the last of all human freedoms is to choose our attitude in any given set of circumstances. So powerful is you don't give your power away. You take full responsibility for what you are doing in life, and it makes you feel very powerful.
My own sort of tendency is often to go into hedgehog in triggered moments, and I think I can speak for Alexis that she's more of a jackal type person.
Yes, I am.
We really zoom in on that moment when, we zoom in on that moment where we're feeling triggered. What can we do in the moment? What are the sort of strategies or tools we can use in that moment to be less reactive and wiser in our communication?
Oh, I love that. I think that's where the work is. It's about working in quite a lot of depth on the meerkat chair, the weight chair, where the top skills, because each, when I work with the 5 chairs, each chair has a set of skills to work on, to develop, to understand, or in the case of the jackal and the hedgehog, is to reduce, is to understand it first in order to bring it less into the world. Yeah. But in the essential meerkat practices of self-management are really around self-control through using a high level of curiosity. We've lost the beautiful curiosity that children have as they look around the world, saying, and the extraordinary thing is that adults only ask about 20 questions a day. Children between the age of 3 and 5 ask about 290 questions a day. Okay, that's a bit over the top, because in fact, the statistics are they ask about 40,000 questions between the age of 2 and 5.
Wow.
We lost this curiosity. We go to school and what we learn is we learn to answer questions rather than to ask powerful questions. So, when I did a coaching course, I rediscovered the power of questions and how you can lead conversations. And when somebody else is triggered, using the right questions with a high level of curiosity can really help a person come into another state. Like, for example, if Alex is in jackal, then asking the right question can bring her out, because she gets a dopamine hit. When you ask anybody a question, you shine the light on their ego. It's like, it's the light's on me. I need to answer, and dopamine floods the body, and she then has to get herself together to answer the question. So she automatically becomes a little bit more rational. So one area is in the meerkat chair is how can we ask powerful questions which come from an intention of real curiosity and affection, even though the person is being jackal. But that means that you understand why Alex is being a jackal, because there are big benefits of jackaling. The jackal is all about self-protection. It's about surviving. It's about getting results. It's about winning, and there's some very positive things about jackal. The downside is it can be alienating, and it can push people away. It can create fear. But we are all jackals at some stage, in different ways. As soon as we can understand why we are a jackal, and like Sally, when you are a hedgehog, between the two of you, when you understand what are the advantages and disadvantages of your behaviors, you can then begin to empathize. And then this thing of being patient with each other and tolerant with each other, and even just giving each other a little bit of feedback. Oh, that sounds like a little bit of a jackal comment there. Playful. But I think a big part of managing another person, also people management in general, is first managing yourself to be able to hold the energy, the potentially negative energy of the other person who's standing in front of you, and then maybe take them on a journey which takes them out of their They're being stuck in an unhealthy pattern.
That's so powerful. And, that's something that we speak to a lot in our human leadership model, is that to lead others, we have to start by leading ourselves. And I just wanted to go back to a comment you made just before that, though, because I thought it was this incredible opportunity to dissect this a little bit more. And this is this idea of curiosity. And I think, again, Sally's mentioned, I'm definitely someone who, if I'm really triggered, my defense mechanism is jackal. It's to sort of outwardly project that fear into like, well, you're doing this, or you've said this, or whatever the case is. But I think when we go into that mode, and in the same way that Hedgehog does the same, but sort of internalizes that in a different way. Yeah, but we make it about ourselves. We make the situation about ourselves when it may or may not actually be about ourselves. But bringing that element of curiosity stops us and stops our ego from making it a story about ourselves, to actually opening that opportunity to say, okay, well, what's going on for the other person here that they, no one can make me be a jackal. Someone has said something to me that's triggered my ego. What am I making, am I making a story out of this about me? Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is so important what you say, Alex, because we tell ourselves stories continuously.
Mm-hmm.
The brain is very good at lying to us. The body will tell you the truth most of the time. And I think another thing is that the more we are in contact in a subtle way with our bodies, the body will tell you, watch it, you're about to misbehave. Because things will start stirring within you, and that is the moment where we need to step in, and curiosity saying, "Oh wow, look how I am reacting to that statement." But maybe the person next to me isn't reacting at all. So what button has that person touched in me that I'm reacting in that way? And then you go on, and it's self-exploration, which is endless journey.
Well, and the fascinating thing is, if we don't have our buttons on the table, people can't press the buttons, can they? So that's on us.
Yes, that's it.
So,
And that's the self-knowledge, because you will still probably react, but it'll take you a lot less time to get out of the reactive mode and into more collaborative mode.
And I think that that's one of the things I love about the 5 chairs, that even since I've discovered your work, Louise, is that even in this short time, I've actually managed to, I think, quite often shorten the period that in which I stay stuck in jackal or hedgehog, and bring that self-awareness to it, and perhaps go back to the person and reopen up the conversation. Sometimes in the moment, but sometimes, there might be a couple of hours or a half day that goes by, but just making that period as short as possible, so that the relationship can continue in a really nourishing and beautiful way as soon as possible. It's such an empowering framework.
If we look at the way we're leading ourselves every day, it's really about how we manage the small things in life, because we're being triggered at the small irritations. The way a person manages to deal with all of those, and my God, are there lots in a day?
Yeah.
There's everything about their leadership. Because, I mean, if you allow yourself to go into the irritation of the moment, or into the negative emotions of the other person, then if they're contagious, then they will allow them to change you. So by the end of the day, you go home to your family and you're about to explode. With the people that we love most, it's ironic, isn't it? We tend to behave best with the people that we work with, who are not our family and we don't necessarily love. And then, the best the best hours of a day are spent with the people that we don't love and are not necessarily the most important people in our lives. But then we go home in the evening and sometimes vomit all over our families, because we're just out of control. These are the people that count the most.
Yeah, you're so right. And I guess it's going into really the next question that we wanted to dive into here, Louise. And you've sort of alluded to what I expect will form part of this answer anyway. And, that is, what are the key ways that leaders can sort of use these 5 chairs? And in particular, and again, you have mentioned this, how can we notice these chairs in perhaps some of our team members, and how might we best handle some of those situations? So I guess the most, as you've mentioned, prohibitive 2 chairs to be in, or the ones where we need to pay the most attention to the impact they can have, is probably the jackal and the hedgehog. So What should we be doing when we notice some of our team members slipping into these chairs to sort of disarm them in those situations and bring them out?
When I work with leaders, I like to work with leadership teams because the chairs themselves, if you work in a team together, I think one of the most important things, whether you're working with adults or also with children, is people have to own their behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And often people are not doing that, and they're not recognizing their behaviors. So if I work with a leadership team, we will do a couple of days on the chairs. But because the chairs are in front of us, it is a way of recognizing your behaviors. And you can recognize yourself being a jackal and sort of say, oh my God, I'm pretty full on jackal. But when we open it up and talk about what it means to be jackal, everybody is to some degree or another. So people don't feel threatened by the model. They feel there's a sort of level of inclusiveness which allows people to work on themselves in a non-threatening way. Because once a team has the language, they can play with it with each other. And it's like, well, we're all in all of the chairs at some time. Some people sit more in one chair and less in another, etc. But it does then allow the team to open up a little bit more and recognize where they are, and therefore give feedback, which is valuable in a safe way to one another. So you have a language. What I've also done is, often in organizations, is you make the language of the five chairs the culture of the organization. So it's a feedback culture. So everybody in the organization knows if you say, well, that was a bit jackal, maybe we should sit in the meerkat chair for a few minutes and think about this one.
What I'm really hearing that's really critical here is, it's not about calling other people out on their behavior. It's firstly about creating a culture of common language around what this framework looks like, what these triggers look like for people, so that it feels safe for everyone to identify themselves in those chairs. And then
Yes.
it's about really imbuing that into their culture so that there's this that necessary safety to say, hey, it feels like this might be coming up today or that might be coming up today. And we know that feedback culture is in a safe space with that common language we have there.
Exactly. And it's also about learning to forgive one another. We all become jackals, especially in situations where, I mean, our cohort is overly stressed, overly worked. I mean, this is
Yeah.
unsustainable, the way we are living our lives. But the more you have conversations of recognition that we are all in the same boat in many, many ways, that does help increase the tolerance that there is. And the level of forgiveness. I mean, it is funny because sometimes when people have learnt the chairs, it's like, aha, now I know what a jackal is, isn't it? You're a jackal. That's being a jackal. If you say you're a jackal to another person, you're accusing them. So, let's be gentle. It's about like when you learn a new skill, you're trying it out on anybody you want to be better than. So, that type of thing. But so it's inviting people to really forgive one another and to be tolerant of one another,
And it really invites in some humility and vulnerability as well. And I think that's such a beautiful thing when leaders can really use this language that inherently brings vulnerability and creates, as Alexis mentioned, that safe space for people to be self-reflective and almost with a little bit of, self-humor, like, yeah, I tend to do that sometimes, but bringing that awareness that we bring to ourselves is so empowering.
I warn parents because we're working with children now between the age of 4 and 14, and it's just such beautiful work. I mean, I'm working with these teachers who are bringing fabulous ideas because the kids really fall in love with the animals, and they begin to own their behaviors. That was me. I was a jackal. They actually own their behaviors. And they have no problem. Then the kids who will never own up to their behaviors, when they see the animals, they say, "Oh yeah, I do that." And that breaks down an incredible barrier. But I say to parents, because what we try to do in the school, the dream is we work on the teachers work on the children, we work on the parents too, and then we hit the whole community. Is that everybody is aware of behaviors and using the language. But I do say to parents, I say, be careful, because when kids learn it, they learn it fast, and they will come up to you and say, "Daddy, you're being a jackal." Extremely careful not to jackal them back, because then you're going to break the magic of that moment, of recognition of behaviors.
Yeah. So I love this segue. We've sort of talked about the 5 chairs in the context of the work and leadership environment as professionals. Tell us more about why it's so important that we can also bring this framework to our personal, family, or sort of private situations as well.
God, it's so important. I was working with a client, and it was with the European Council actually, and we were doing some webinars. And it was we had a weekend to go. They had a weekend to go away and practice, and I said, go and practice on your children. If you've got children, or on your husband, wives, and maybe use some questions, the mere questions of curiosity, and just play around, keep the jackal down. Go on a mental diet, try not to judge. So it was beautiful. On the Monday morning when they came back, I said, how was the jackal over the weekend? And one of the ladies, she said, you know what? I used the meerkat with my daughter. And it was a classic situation. She said, my daughter, 17-year-old, her room is just a total abhorrent mess. And she's always had the conversation, which is, how many bloody times do I have to tell you to clean your room? I am sick and tired. She said, I didn't do that. I went into the room and I looked around, and she said, tell me about your room. Because I noticed that's over there and this is here, and this went to the facts. Yeah. And her daughter said, actually, those things are over there because they have a special place because I use them when I'm doing my art. These and these. She explained her chaos to her mother, and it was ordered chaos. And her mother said, wow, I had never even thought about it like that. And at the end, this conversation just continued. And at the end of the conversation, her daughter said, that was an amazing conversation, Mum. Can we have more like them?
Wow.
And it was like, oh my God. And she said it was amazing for her. All she did was she opened up towards her daughter and asked some questions of curiosity. And her daughter came forth with all sorts of things that her mother hadn't even thought about, because her mother was being jackal because she was stressed out in the same old thing. And then, and she said, I'm going to use it from now on. And really, so beautiful.
Oh my goodness. And, what I'm hearing there, Louise, and so firstly, I think that would be, had I been asked those questions as a child, and again, it comes back to this idea that often the dynamic between parent and child is knower, and that then becomes the job to pass on what we know and make sure the rules are in order and things like that. And, as a child, often that can leave us feeling very unseen and unheard, and actually, in my experience, and perhaps yours as well, Louise, is misunderstood. And then that, that's why we turn to these defensive behaviors down the track, because we've learnt this, like trying to defend, trying to explain, trying to get you to understand.
Her daughter said, well, it's useless talking to you because you never listen.
Exactly. And, to translate that to the work, the work sense, because I think the role that we assume as leaders very often is that we have to have the answers, we have to know, and we have to then tell to keep things flowing, to keep budgets hit, et cetera, et cetera. And so we forget to ask questions because we forget that that's part of our job as well.
Well, plus it's the power that when a leader asks their team questions, the team feels seen, heard, important, valued. Oh, me. And of course, they have to be powerful questions, not threat questions. Or even when a leader says, I don't know, but maybe you can help me. Of course, 80% of people hearing a leader being extremely human are going to love to be around that leader. And this is all about how do I invite people to want to be in my presence? And this is so important, rather than the command and control and, it's my way or the highway and all the rest of it, which just doesn't work. So absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I guess what I'm hearing there is that there's actually really no separation between how these chairs impact us at work or at home, because human beings are inherently, we need to feel understood. It's part of our innate nature.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really, it's you carry them everywhere with you, even in the street. I mean, even the street, somebody can bump into, I was in Berlin the other day, and somebody was going along the pavement and just knocked straight into me. And, really pretty violent, and it nearly knocked me over. And they were, they had beer in their hands and all the rest of it. I had a choice. I could be a jackal turn and I say, yeah, but that's a waste of life. I mean, it's actually not about me, and then you can quickly say, okay, take a deep breath and look, he's got beer in his hands. He's, I don't know what's going on in his world, but he might be drunk. He might be having a tough time. I don't know, but I'm not going to spoil my beautiful moment right now because of a behavior like that.
And I think that's such a beautiful example of how sometimes we can feel like when we bringing that compassion and empathy to our behavior, we can be afraid that we're almost disempowering ourselves, but it's actually one of the most empowering things that we can do.
Thank you, Sally. That's so important. You need so much courage to be empathetic because you are putting your ego aside, and your brain doesn't like that because the brain likes to be at the center of attention and protecting you. But that is the things I am completely opening up to the other person. I have no clue what's going to come at me, but I'm feeling steady like an oak tree, and I feel I can take whatever comes at me and deal with that.
Sort of, I guess we're getting to the end of our conversation here, but, we'd love to hear in your experience, and, you've spoken about how the chairs have really transformed your personal life, but also your professional life. And we'd love to hear, in that professional setting, perhaps for a leader, what sort of advice would you give to someone who's coming fresh into these 5 chairs, and what's the best place for them to start to begin integrating these 5 chairs into their leadership style? Where would you advise us to start with this?
I think the big piece is, the first thing, they could read the book. That would help. I could do the training for them, but it really is the self-awareness. I noticed in my own leadership, my leadership was stilted because of this, problem with jealousy and possessiveness. As soon as you connect to the behaviors that are holding you back, then you can consciously work on them. And as soon as you are aware in a deeply conscious way of behaviors that you are not healthy for you first, the subconscious will start working on that anyway. And then I think you can, like in my case, it was, there was too much power over, but I was actually being a headshot because I felt extremely vulnerable, but it would come over sometimes as the possessiveness as power over people. It's about, okay, it's how do I give my trust to people? How do I share power with people? How do I listen to others and allow other people to grow? That move into the servant leadership, because that was the most difficult thing for me because I had to protect myself. So it was like dropping the mask and saying, no, I have to trust people. But that took ages. I had to let go of jealousy and possessiveness, and it took me 20 years. That's why, and also another reason why I developed the 5 chairs is to help people not take 20 years to get over themselves.
It's important to have some compassion for that process as well, because it's been such an important coping mechanism. That protective desire comes from a healthy place deep within it. Ultimately, it wants to, look after our survival from a very early age. So I think it's only natural that it takes quite a long time. But I'm so glad you shared that as well, because I think that's something that is really nice to be reminded of for me on the journey, that it's not a one and done, and it's not something that you will, you flick a switch and you're good. This is an ongoing process, and a really beautiful one.
Beautiful. Yeah, it is. It is, and I'm still learning, I tell you. And I don't. Well, I think Albert Einstein said, once you stop learning, you start dying. And I think the more we are actually curious about learning about ourselves, this is a gift we give ourselves, and we stay, I don't know, I think it's amazing how even at the age of like 65, I'm still learning about myself. Still learning. Well, it's a crazy thing to say, because if you really are into self-awareness, you're going to learn until the day you die. But it is amazing journey being a human being. Once you become very interested in how we work and what we do and why we do it and who we do it with, and all the whole journey is just magnificent. So really the 5 chairs is an invitation to help people get on that journey faster and have a tool that they can keep with them for the rest of their lives, which is sort of fairly psycho-accessible, let's say.
Thank you for that, Louise, because it's a reminder to all of us that, and as Sally has mentioned, this isn't a one and done. It's like an onion, really. The more we start to know ourselves, the more we actually become more capable, I guess, of peeling back the next layer to say, okay, now this is how it's presenting in this setting, or this is now how this situation is testing me to see, what I've learned and how I can bring this in a new way. I just want to say thank you from all of us at Human Leaders for giving us this opportunity to learn from you, for gifting us with the 5 chairs framework. Because I know when I first saw your TED talk on YouTube, it felt like you're inside my brain and you were just calling me out on my behavior. And I knew from that moment I had to learn more, because there was so much integration for me still to be done around this framework. And as Sally's mentioned, we both use your framework very regularly in our work, in our leadership with each other. So thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. And thank you so much for this incredibly powerful framework for leaders and for anyone listening.
Well, thank you so much, because you two are extraordinary. It was a deep joy for me to talk to you, and I love the questions you ask, the way you work together, and what you're doing in your organization. I mean, just talking about being more human is so incredibly important. So I thank you for the opportunity, and hope to see you in person very soon.
We hope that you enjoyed our powerful and delightful conversation with Louise Evans. You can find Louise at www.the5chairs.com and her book, 5 Chairs, 5 Choices, Own Your Behaviour, Master Your Communication, Determine Your Success, available now wherever you buy your books. You can find more details of Louise and her work in our show notes. Thank you so much for sharing this space with us. If you are ready to join us and be part of the Human Leaders community, find us at www.wearehumanleaders.com. Thanks for being on the journey with us, and we'll see you next time.